In medieval times, monasteries were officially regarded as centers of asceticism, service to God, and modesty. And irrespective of whether it was a men's or a women's monastery, the rules of accommodation, the schedule of life, and the list of restrictions and regulations mandatory for all was essentially the same. In truth, however, sometimes the nunneries in particular became not a model of righteous living, but a center of debauchery and even of outright bacchanalia. And each European country had its own distinctive features in this matter. Today, we will tell you about indecent moments in monasteries throughout Europe in Middle Ages. You're watching Flip Side of History. Welcome to the channel. The scandals in Great Britain. One of the most renowned monasteries in Britain with an unsightly history is Littlemore Abbey. It has been haunted by curses since its completion in the 12th century. According to some sources, at first the nuns prayed devoutly that the ceiling would not collapse on them. However, the fear soon passed and rumors began to circulate in the vicinity, one stranger than the next. It appears that the nuns would invite travelers, pilgrims, and knights to spend the night, and then charge incredible and fantastic rates for their services. Already in the 15th century, the nunnery became the very center of sexual promiscuity, theft, and other unsightly pictures. Young men and guys were lured by the nuns and then had actual orgies in their cells. Furthermore, many of the lucky ones then found that their money and other valuables had disappeared. The heavy drinking quickly used up the church's wine supply, so the nuns started selling church wares to buy booze. But the most bizarre thing about the abbey was the reign of Abbess Catherine Wells. Nuns were beaten, starved, and humiliated in every way imaginable, including in sadomasochistic ways. In desperation, many of the girls were forced to sell themselves in order to earn a little money for food. At the same time, the abbess herself openly lived with the priest, by whom she gave birth to her daughter. Those of the nuns who enjoyed the abbess' patronage also lived with men, without the slightest concealment, and some were even pregnant at the time of the bishop's inspection. The inspection itself took place in 1517, when rumors became so heated that Bishop William Atwater was forced to send his representative Edmund Ord to analyze that situation. The priest was distraught when he saw that much of the abbey land had either been mortgaged or sold to the abbess' cohabitant. Moreover, the abbess would give her child to the nuns when the priest came to conduct investigations. It was discovered that several nuns, imprisoned in the stocks by the abbess for their faults, had managed to break free, rebelled against Catherine Wells, and left for a nearby village, where they began to live openly, by the way, all four of them, with the gentlemen. So many facts were gathered that by order of the bishop the convent was dissolved and closed, and the abbess was charged with nymphomania, drunkenness, theft, and adultery. Honorable Nuns of Italy. In Italy, unlike in Great Britain, nuns did not commit theft, at least not openly. There were also no recorded instances of the sale of church goods. On the other hand, when it came to providing pleasures, the nunneries of Italy staggered the imagination even of their contemporaries. Many monasteries, in fact, became brothels behind thick walls. In Venice, for instance, nuns generally wore loose-fitting, short dresses, and they only covered their necklines during church services. Naturally, there was no shortage of those wishing to receive the love of a beautiful nun in a nun's outfit. Abbesses were busy finding the most successful parts for them. This is best described by Alexander Paradis in his book The Life and Work of Balthasar Cossa, Pope John XXIII. Nor did the severe morality of the nuns' clothing, which emphasized their natural beauty and slenderness. Almost all monasteries throughout Italy welcomed male visitors. Spanish delights. Similarly to Italy, Spain was not far behind in the subtleties of a nunnery life, and the distinctive feature was the fact that the nuns of the Spanish convents differed in their character, and this very specification was determined by male visitors, who gave unofficial names to the monasteries, depending probably on the number and type of services provided. The Abbey of Dolls, the Abbey of Penitent Magdalenes, and so on. To be honest, in Spain they tried to punish nuns for debauchery, but as our contemporaries testified, the number of such convicted servants of the Lord grew dramatically. It is not surprising, therefore, that as in Great Britain, history knows of a case in which a monastery was closed because the nuns' debauchery crossed all possible bounds. The dissoluteness of the nuns in the convent of St. John the Baptist in the city of Bologna was so great the authorities were forced to expel all the nuns and close the monastery. The nuns from the monastery of St. Leonard were placed under the supervision of the monastery of St. Lavrentius. Attempts to bring order in Germany. Germans were always disciplined and tended to be orderly. Therefore, the authorities tried their best to stop the bacchanalia that occurred in some monasteries. And unlike in other countries, the German authorities punished nuns quite severely. In the Swabian Jura, for example, the Nuttensel Abbey was transformed into a real brothel. At any time of the day or night, a client who could pay for the delicate services could visit the affectionate nuns. Eventually, the patron and donor Duke Julius of Braunschweig, who supported the monastery financially, decided it was time to put an end to the sexual mischief. On his personal orders, the Mother Superior was literally immersed in the wall alive. The German church authorities, to their credit, conducted both preventive and, in modern parlance, unannounced inspections of monasteries. It is true that the results were often startling. For an example, at the Seflingen Abbey, majority of the nuns were found to be pregnant. The most curious case is that of the so-called brothel for the nobility, as Tallinn's Oberndorf monastery was unofficially called. It was visited exclusively by noble and wealthy citizens, and its inhabitants were about 2/10 of nuns, also of aristocratic descent. A favorite game in the abbey was to suddenly blow out the lights during a feast. Then the visitors and the keepers would have sexual intercourse with whomever they encountered. In Basel, in an effort to stop promiscuous visitors to the monasteries, the authorities decided to act differently. They simply forbade nuns to enter the city and then imposed a fine of 10 guldens on anyone who ventured into a monastery with sinful intentions. French traditions. The land of love was notable not only for the fun-loving temperament of the nuns, but also for the most authentic bacchanalia in the spirit of the Roman Saturnalia. When heated with wine, men and women made a real dumping ground of entwined bodies and lust. It went so far as to say that the nuns, by rules made by the monasteries of Paris, were categorically forbidden to participate in bacchanalia and orgies. Nearly 3 decades after the issuance of the ban, it was reissued again, as few in the monasteries paid any attention to words of the French church fathers. The interesting thing is that even in official documents, these orgies were called worship of the phallus and insane holidays. However, prohibition did little to help, for in 1245 the renewed Bishop Odin, visiting the Rouen monasteries, reported that nuns were indulging in indecent pleasures there on a grand scale at the feasts. Nuns and brothels. The most astonishing case in history took place in Avignon, France, during the middle of the 14th century. By order of Queen Joan, all of the harlots and promiscuous maidens were rounded up and imprisoned in a special monastery. It was formerly believed that nuns imprisoned in the cells were atoning for their sins before the Lord. Actually, though, it was a genuine brothel operating under the Queen's patronage. The abbess herself decided whether to let a client in or not, which cell to send him to. At the same time, unlike in ordinary brothels, the nuns had much less freedom and, of course, no money for their services. To be fair, the clients were obliged not to hurt the girls, and as we said earlier about it being truly shocking, the workers themselves were periodically examined by a doctor. But nothing could help to stop the promiscuous and deviant behavior. The bacchanalia in the monasteries, and not only in the monasteries but outside of them, ended only with the outbreak of the syphilis epidemic, which was no more deadly in its consequences than the plague. Thank you for watching this episode. Subscribe to Flip Side of History and also leave a like. Apart from that, watch our other videos on the channel.